This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good evening, it's me flying solo this evening because Ed is rather busy on educational matters as the primary head teacher of Chagford Primary. I think he's otherwise engaged in some sort of inspection device that's going on at the moment, so he can't possibly do the radio show. Anyway, we're going to talk about science, my route into science, my idea for a science book for non-scientists, and all that.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Here I am. I'm solo. It's just me, obviously missing Ed, but I did rather overdose on Ed last week. So I think our show last week was quite formal and sensible, and because we'd spent so much time in each other's company only a few hours earlier, we'd spent 24 hours in each other's company, and so I felt that the whole chemistry of our show wasn't quite firing last week. I think Ed felt the same because we'd caught up, and so we didn't have that nice kind of, oh, what are Ed and Toby, how are they going to interact this week sort of vibe going on. Although I know Lucy told us that it was still a nice show, it was still a good show, because Lucy is lovely. Good evening, Lucy. Good evening, Tim. And good evening, Rachel. Your shout out is coming. You'll have to wait just a few minutes, Rachel. You don't have to wait until the end of the show. I'm not going to keep you hanging on that long. Anyway, so I think we'll just talk about what a lovely time I had with Ed, but then he'll be back next week and we'll do all the sort of Toby and Ed stuff, and we'll talk about our walk, because we went for the most magnificent walk in Devon, and we had a lovely swim together. It was just beautiful walking around Heartland, my favourite part of the northwest Devon coast, and it was a beautiful day last Friday, and we ended up swimming at low tide at Speaks Mill Mouth, which is the highest waterfall on the west facing coast between Hartland Point and Bude. So just it's nearly in Cornwall, if you like, and if you know that part of the world. And we went for a dip, and in the at low tide, there's a bit of sand there, and it was lovely. It was just lovely. And then I stayed with Ed, and I met Rachel, as we spoke about, obviously just before. So Rachel Higginson in Exeter, who has just sent a lovely tweet about me wittering on tonight. I can't promise it's going to be great, but who knows. Anyway, it was lovely to see so much of Ed, and he is a wonderful man, and he is very busy, involved with schooly related stuff. So, and Lucy's just told us that her halftime highlight was a trip to Kew Gardens with a lovely Twitter friend who lives miles away and I don't often see. Yeah, it's great, isn't it? Meeting people. So it was great to meet Rachel at Creative Hig, have I not met before, who is, and it's lovely. That's the lovely thing about Twitter, isn't it? When you meet people who seem so lovely and fascinating and funny online, and they are just as wonderful, if not more wonderful, in the flesh. And that, of course, applies to the very wonderful Rachel Ross, who I did meet at New Voices last October. She's great fun, and so we'll come to that, because I'm going to talk about reflections on the Jubilee to begin with, before we get into the science thing. And I think so. I'm just going to talk about Twitter for a bit, and Twitter and the Jubilee, because I was down in Devon for the Jubilee, and I probably wouldn't, if I was on my own or with my children, or once I've got my new house in late summer, once everything settles down for me personally, I probably wouldn't have watched much Jubilee stuff. I'm not a Republican, but I'm not exactly an arch royalist either. But being with my mum, my dear old mum, who's not too great really down in Devon, she is an arch royalist, and it was lovely to sort of sit with her in her kitchen and her really peculiar rituals that she has, multiple machines on at once. She normally has her sort of either her iPad or her mobile phone playing YouTube sort of fake news about Harry and Meghan. Then she had the tennis, the French Open tennis on her laptop, and then she had the TV on with all the Jubilee stuff, and you've got all this noise, and it's just it's really hard. But anyway, it was lovely to watch Trooping the Colour and The Fly Past with dear mother, and then locally to go down to my local village in Devon, Langtree, and go down to have a few drinks with the local farmers, some of them I hadn't seen for a long time, and watch the lighting of the beacon to be part of that. And then Friday, of course, Ed and I went for a walk, so I didn't pay much attention to whatever happened on Friday. And then the Saturday, what was the big event on the Saturday? It was the Platinum Party at the Palace. So again, I was watching this with my dear mother, and it was pretty awful, I thought. Not really my kind of thing, but very impressive. I mean, the lighting designers did get a little carried away, didn't they? All those projections onto Buckingham Palace. I mean, incredibly impressive. But anyway, I was on the Twitter during the Platinum Party at the Palace, and so were a great many people. And it's a bit like Eurovision night on Twitter, where you suddenly realise that Twitter or any other online social media, I suppose the same probably applies on Snapchat or Instagram or Facebook perhaps, but it was just funny on Twitter, and Rachel was particularly funny. So big shout out to the wonderful Rachel Ross, and big shout out to Chris Moyse as well, who was just absolutely, he was hysterical as well. So we were just laughing at Rod Stewart. I think Rachel's wit is very funny. And there was one about, we were talking about how hardly anyone was singing their own songs. And then I think Rachel put, and Elton, or was it Chris? I can't remember. Are you going to sing your own song, or something like that? I can't remember exactly. Anyway, I haven't got it all there, but it was just very funny to enjoy watching this. I thought fairly sort of cheesy, massively overproduced, but spectacular concert, Platinum concert, but just having bants online. And I think that's sort of Twitter at its best. It was. Did you actually? Rachel has just said I loved it. Did you love the laughing and the tweeting about it, or did you actually genuinely love the concert? I mean, was it a sort of cultural beacon of the best of British and American music? The bands. She loved the bands. Good. I'm glad you clarified that. Anyway, but it was great. That was good. And then on Sunday, I stuck around in Devon and watched the pageant with Mother Dearest as well. Before driving back in the rain and then sitting in an almighty traffic jam around Stonehenge, and not getting back till midnight to Kent on Sunday night. So a bit of a tiring Monday for me. Anyway, there we go. That's Jubilee and Twitter. But because of Twitter being so good and such fun in that sort of frivolous sense, I'm going to try and find, where is it? Audio effects. I can't remember what audio effect I used to use. We're going to bring back for a week, maybe more, who knows. I'm going to bring back, where is it? Is it this? Tweet of the week. Now, this is a little indulgent, and it's a little bit greedy of me, really, I suppose. Oh gosh, I haven't even got it here, but it's my own tweet. So I'm going to talk about a few other tweets as well. But when I was I went down to Devon, and I took a huge box of books with me. I haven't taken books home for the weekend or for a holiday half term for a long time. I stay late and get it all done at school now. And but we had a sort of book look today, and I just thought, oh yeah, and I thought I'll go and get it done. So I took these books down, and then Ed noticed them when he met me at my mum's before we went out for our walk. He said, "What have you got those there for?" And anyway, so I decided to take a picture of the box of books. I don't know, I had about 50 books, I suppose, and school books, and I just said, I've lost the tweet. I haven't bookmarked it, and it's all over my Twitter, but it's kind of not been there for a while. But it was just about the my box of year 5 and year 6 science books have had a very sedentary and utterly pointless trip to Devon. And Ed retweeted it, Tabitha retweeted it, and a couple of people retweeted it, and it's ended up. I think it's had 544 likes. I don't think it's my best tweet, but it's and it's not. There's one or two tweets that have gone a bit more viral than that in the past, but it's just bonkers. But it obviously resonated with a lot of people, so I thought I'd mention that. That made me laugh. There's been a few other tweets that I have also caught my attention in the last few days, as I've been a bit busy on Twitter of late. And I liked Tabitha McIntosh yesterday. Good old Tabitha. There's a lot of stuff about slant, and I get the idea that slant was it sit up and listen and pay attention and eyes track the teacher. I can't remember what it all stands for, to be honest, but it's one of the teach like a champion techniques, isn't it? And I think obviously I try to do that. If I'm interested in something, I track whoever's speaking and I look and I nod. That's right, the end's nodding, isn't it? And agreeing. And of course, if you're, it's kind of active or profound kind of listening, isn't it? And attention and respect. I get it, but equally we can be learning whilst our eyes are drifting out the window and we're daydreaming and all that sort of stuff. So, and the idea that adults pay attention and sit like that all day in their jobs or professionally is also somewhat flawed. So I rather like Tabitha Street said, if I required every child to carry a miniature pineapple at all times and my outcomes were excellent, you'd be measuring the effects of institutional compliance, not miniature pineapples. I thought that was a good tweet. I thought it was quite entertaining. She had quite a long conversation with James Hanscom about it all. And another something else I stumbled across today, nothing to do with teaching, which I like that. I think I like the bits on Twitter that aren't really much to do with teaching, really, the silly bits of fun. And Adam Hills, the comedian, but I love Twitter, and he sort of screenshotted a tweet by someone called Bob Servant, who said 33 years ago today, over a few cans of Kestrel at Invergowrie Services, I said to the Bangles, swap bin man for Egyptian, and you've got a hit. The rest is history. And then Susanna Hoffs, the lead singer of the Bangles, who was a very important figure in my just about pre-adolescent childhood anyway, but let's not go there. She's actually replied to it, Susanna Hoffs, and replied to Bob Servant's tweet, said, can't say I remember this, but I'll take your word. And that's just little things like that entertain me. And in tribute to Ed, who is not with us this evening, I am going to read a poem that he sent me because he visited Rosemore Gardens, which is a RHS garden near to my mother's house in Torrington, Great Torrington, North Devon. It's an amazing garden. It's expanded massively about 30 years ago. I think they expanded it. And it's one of the most beautiful gardens you can visit. And he went there, I think, for the first time. And there's a little sort of thatched cottage. And I thought I recognised the poem. And so Ed sometimes reads out a poem on here. So I'm going to read you out a poem in tribute to my beloved Devon. Here we go. Old Cob Wall. Old Cob Wall. Oh gosh, I need to expand it a bit more. I can't read it. There we go. Old Cob Wall have fell at last. Us knowed he might a good while past. Great Grandad he built thicky wall with maiden earth and oaten straw. He built it in the good old way, and there he stood until today. But wind and rain and frost and snow have all combined to lay in low. Us propped un up with stones and wood. Us done our best, but 'tweren't no good. He gaved a bit, and then a lot, and at the finish, down he squat. And now, since Barnes has got to be, us'll build another stead of he. But not the same he was afore, 'cause no one builds cob walls no more. There we go. Anyway, everybody, let's talk about something educationally. So, I think Ed and I are going to have lots of stuff to talk about over the next few weeks. Very tenuously connected to teaching. We're going to talk about walks, and we're going to talk about the summer term, the second half of the summer term. We're going to talk about when's the best time? When does the best classroom learning happen? We'll probably discount the exam years of year 11 and year 13, but for general other years, when does the best classroom learning happen? Does it happen in September, the start of the school year, or in the deep, dark days of winter in January, in the start of the Easter or winter or second winter or spring term, whatever you call it? Or is it in April? Or is it now in June and July? And so we'll talk about the kind of madness of this final push for our very, very privileged long summer holiday that we all have in a few weeks' time. So we're going to talk about that, and I'd like us to talk about festivals as the build up to the 2-year delayed 50th anniversary of Glastonbury Festival. It's actually obviously the 52nd anniversary, so I think we'll have some sort of chats about festivals and music festivals and all that sort of stuff. But today, as it's just me on my own, I'm going to do something sciencey. Now, I know Ed and I spoke about science a little while ago, but we spoke a bit more about science curriculum. We spoke a bit more about sort of science curriculum and some of my rather idealistic utopian sort of what's the word? Edutopian ideas about what science should be like at school. We're not going to talk about that. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about really, first of all, my journey into science and why I have slightly kind of different views about what science should be like in education, and then a bit about maybe the book that I'm thinking of writing about it that no one will read and probably never get published, but I'll probably still write it anyway. So, and why am I talking about this? Well, some of you will know. I know Lucy does, because she's a very dedicated reader of my rambling stuff. I'm not really posting it via my blog site at the moment. I might have to go a bit private at some point, I think, on a private sort of DM posting or something. But I'm writing a kind of set of memories called From Fertilization to 50, ahead of my 50th birthday on August the 24th. So I'm writing a chapter or an episode for every year of my life. So the first sort of 4 years was about mum and dad and the family home stuff that I couldn't actually remember back then, but the sort of the backdrop to me. And but now I'm writing a sort of a key memory or event or series of events. It's not so it is a biography, obviously, an autobiography, but it's not kind of covering everything. It's covering certain aspects of things, and there's been some intensely personal stuff, and I'm a very reflective person. You could say I'm a egocentric narcissist. I certainly have an element of that in me. I also like writing, and I think I probably write at my best when I'm writing sort of psychologically and reflectively about myself or about sort of experiences that I've had. I am trying at times to write fiction, but I think I need to, that takes a lot of practice and anyway. But I'm really enjoying writing it. And I think one of the things that's quite interesting is it, to try and work out what it is that makes us who we are. And of course we accumulate, don't we, over a great many years, and our 50 or our 58 or our 45 or our 32 is very different to our 15, to our 5, to our 12, to our 19, to our 26, or whatever. And it depends on, there are a whole number of factors that kind of make us who we are, and experiences. But of course, the genetic template that we're kind of born with as well is a pretty huge factor, and how that genetic template interacts with its environment. So one of the things I've reflected on is that I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. Life just sort of happens. It's a journey, and I think an important determinant in me becoming a scientist and now a science teacher was Dad's death when I was 16, because he died. He was ill for a couple of years, and it was cancer, and it was slow and painful, but I didn't really understand it, and I didn't, I suppose, but because of him dying at home and being at home in his bed for quite a long time in his last few weeks, I had a very romantic notion about being a sort of 1950s style GP, general practitioner, and so that's what made me want to become a medic, which I haven't become, and that's probably what made me choose exclusively science A levels, and I always kind of enjoyed chemistry anyway. I didn't love it, but I was quite naturally, it came to me naturally for some reason. So I chose chemistry A level, obviously chose biology A level if I was going to consider medicine, and that was all right as well. And then I didn't actually want to do maths A level. I wanted to do geography, but I couldn't do geography and chemistry on my timetable at school. So, I just did maths. I'd got an a couple of terms early at GCSE, just a couple of months after Dad had died with no revision. So I thought I was some kind of mathematical genius. And then I stumbled across projectiles and applied maths at A level and really did not like it at all. So I flunked my maths A level, and the biology wasn't quite as good as it could have been. And so medical school wasn't going to happen, which I think is a good thing, because quite a few people probably would have been severely injured or died if my biology A level rat dissection was extrapolated. So, but I was locked in. We narrowed too early, I think, in this country. I think we are encouraged to go down either a sciencey or a non-sciencey path. If you want to do the sciences, they say, oh, you can't just do one science at A level. You've got to either couple biology and chemistry, or chemistry and physics, or physics and further maths and maths. So which then, if you're only doing three, and they're pretty meaty, aren't they? So you're only doing three, then that kind of locks you out of a really broad thing. So I think in principle, I'm a bit more of a fan of the kind of IB approach, where you do three majors and three minors, don't you? And you kind of keep a greater variety of things going for longer, if you are of an academic mind. I'm not suggesting that everyone studies deep academically subjects until they're 18, but those of an academic bent, I think, obviously would probably benefit from a broader palette, I would say, and not killing off the arts or killing off the sciences too soon. Anyway, so I ended up with those three not particularly spectacular A levels, and I thought, oh, I'm not going to retake any. So I just fell into a chemistry degree at. It wasn't a chemistry degree, because I was brought up to think that, or I don't know, I suppose I thought as well that scientists were all nerds, and I was far too verbose and too much of a communicator to be a scientist, and that was sort of perhaps brainwashed into me by certain members of my family, maybe. And so I chose to do chemistry with business degree. It was actually 60% chemistry. It wasn't a combined degree. It was dominated by chemistry, applied chemistry with business administration at Kingston Polytechnic in 1991, and just went through clearing. Well, I didn't even go through clearing, I don't think. I just think I'd kind of basically turned up pretty much. And just fell onto that by accident. I quickly realised that the business stuff was not for me. I was not interested in it. It was too hollow. It was too, I know that deep sort of macroeconomics and business at a very high level, and running your own company can be a pretty intense and a pretty stressful thing. But there was a lot of sort of stuff on there that I just felt, oh, this is kind of intuitive and obvious, and there wasn't enough meat. Conversely, on the science bits, on the chemistry bits, there was perhaps too much meat. And that's the thing about the sciences at university, and I suspect this is still true, is that science is, broadly speaking, very, very factual and conceptual and illustrative right until the end of degree level. So I don't personally, that's controversial, I'm sorry, teachers who are listening, but I don't think someone with a chemistry degree or a physics degree or a biology degree, just an undergrad, a straight BSc, bachelor's degree, can really describe themselves as an expert in those subjects, because you're not really trying anything new out. You're just learning theories and concepts and practical skills and practical processes that have been carried out a great many times before. And so I liked it, but I didn't love it. Also, I escaped from sort of a ridiculously posh world down in Devon, and a privileged private school education, which wasn't a very academic school, but I always felt a bit of a chip on my shoulder that I probably needed to be somewhere a bit more academic and la 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 la. And so I sort of drank a lot and messed around a lot and escaped the stress and bereavement and stuff of my teens. So my focus wasn't really on my studies in my first 2 years, but somehow my verbosity and my charm landed me an interview with SmithKline Beecham, which is now GlaxoSmithKline, on a small site down near Tunbridge in Kent. And I went to work there as an undergraduate for a year this is September 1993 and 1994. And this is the episode that I'm writing in the From Fertilization to 50 at the moment. And its title is The Accidental Scientist. So having studied chemistry and biology A-level, we were the cultural beacon, Toby. I'm just spooling through what's on here. I think, sorry, big yourself up, Tim's saying. I don't know, that's reacting to something I said earlier on. I've not got this song. Okay. Anyway, I think that sorry, I've lost my train of thought just reading some of the comments online. Pause. I'm going to pause for a sip of hot chocolate. I'm not on the whiskey or the wine tonight. Being sensible. Busy days ahead. Anyway, I think that I kind of enjoyed science and I liked it, but I didn't like just having to learn all this stuff. And so when I turned up at SmithKline Beecham in September 1993, I suddenly, first thing I realised that scientists aren't all geeks and nerds and people who have got sort of social ineptitude. That's not true. It was a very young site. There were quite a lot of other students there. Previous year's students overlapped with us for a couple of weeks, and there were 8 of us, and there were only about 100 people on the site altogether, undergraduate students across the site. And so it was quite, and there were quite a lot of fresh PhD students, relatively new sort of postgrads and postdocs on site. And so I sort of really enjoyed the social side, was good. But also I was doing science. I worked in the mass spectrometry department. Mass spectrometry is an analytical chemistry technique which really, it identifies the mass of ions and IONS, charged particles, depending on the relative molecular mass of a charged molecular ion, and you can characterize what has been perhaps made in a chemical reaction, produced in a chemical reaction, using that and other techniques as well. And so it was very analytical. I wasn't doing reaction chemistry, but I was working closely with a lot of organic chemists who were doing chemical reactions and synthesis in proper normal kind of chemistry labs. Organic synthesis, that's carbon-based chemistry for those of you who are not chemists. And it was a brand new lab. It was carpeted because the mass spectrometers, the 2 mass spectrometers were in there, huge, great machines with vacuum pumps, quite noisy. The vacuum pumps are constantly whirring to kind of draw a vacuum inside the instrument. And very, very low sample sizes were used. So there was not much sort of mess in a mass spectrometry lab, but quite a lot of background noise. So they'd fitted a carpet in the lab to soak up some of the sound. So that was quite interesting. So it was my job as the lackey, as the undergraduate student in that lab, to hoover the lab every Friday afternoon. And my boss, my supervisor, the late great Duncan Bryant, he was a brilliant scientist. He was only 7 years older than me, so I was 21 at the time, and he was in his late 20s. He'd done 2 years postdoctoral research in America, the University of Baltimore, and he had done his PhD through the Open University before that, and started at Imperial, I think, and then his PhD supervisor moved to the Open University of Milton Keynes, and then he was an Imperial graduate. But he was just the most fascinating character. Tragically, he died before he was Oh, he died about 40. Yeah, I was in my early 30s. He had a heart condition. And so the Royal Society of Chemistry have got a molecular spectroscopy award, named after Duncan Bryant, I think, and he was formidable scientist, but he was one of those great sort of quirky intellectuals. Um, we used to do a pub quiz at a pub in Tunbridge called the Cardinal's Error, and it was just it was quite an intellectual sort of pub quiz. He was sort of sort of Stephen Fry like character. Didn't look like Stephen Fry or sound like Stephen Fry, but he just knew an awful lot about an awful lot of things, and he wasn't just locked in his scientific world. He knew an awful lot about all sorts of classical music. He introduced me to Sibelius and Shostakovich, but he also loved dub reggae and Queen and who was that brilliant comedian? Hello, John got a new motor. The Alexi Sale. He used to do brilliant Alexi Sale impression. And he was just a very interesting guy and very, very bright. And he brought science alive for me. So it was no teacher, it was no university lecturer. It was and he had only been working there for about a year because after his postdoctoral stuff. So and he wasn't uncommon, actually. There was a lot of very, very bright scientists. Some of them have gone on. So one of Duncan's kind of bosses, a guy called Mike Webb, went on to be head of chemical development, which is quite a large chunk of pharmaceutical research at GlaxoSmithKline in Stevenage, and then Dave Lathbury, one of the organic chemists who I worked with. He went on to become pretty senior in Astra before it merged with AstraZeneca. And then Dave Ennis, who was a very young organic chemist, is now head of chemical development at AstraZeneca up in Macclesfield. And I got to work with all these people when they were in their sort of late 20s, early 30s, and I was an impressionable 21-year-old, sort of bit of a posh twat, really, for want of a better term, but also, quite, not, a bit wide-eyed 21-year-old, and it just brought science alive. You were working, and you were kind of working, you know, with just people and solving problems and it was fun. It was a great place, and it suddenly made me think I am a scientist. So it's when I decided that I am a scientist, because I was doing science. I got to do a research project with Duncan, which he later then published, and so my name was on the paper that he wrote, based on kind of some of the work we did together. Any chemists listening, we were looking at exchanging hydrogen deuterium exchange in an ion spray. That's an atmospheric pressure ionization. So what we were doing was we were looking at peptides and proteins which have got lots of hydrogens on them. Some of the hydrogen atoms in molecules, organic molecules, and peptides and proteins have a lot of what we call labile hydrogens. That's hydrogens that can be react quite easily and be lost. And so if you introduce deuterium, which is an isotope of hydrogen with a larger mass, so it's got extra neutrons in it, or an extra neutron in it, so that you kind of get a different mass on your mass spectrometer, and you can then work out in a denatured, that's an unfolded protein, or a native protein, which is kind of in its natural kind of folded arrangement. You could work out how many labile hydrogens in there, which is kind of from a kind of stability, a physical stability or a chemical stability thing. So it was just fascinating, and I got to do that, and that inspired my dissertation in my final year. And so I just thought, by the end of the year, having had a very great social year as well as learning science, I thought, I am a scientist and I'm going to become a scientist. So I went back and actually did some work at university, and at that point, I went back and did some work in my university, my final year, and then graduated. And I will give a very brief summary after the news on my work at Zeneca and Pfizer. And then I'm going to talk to you about my book idea and why I think this matters, and how it affects my perspective on teaching science, and why I don't currently choose to teach GCSE or A-level chemistry. We'll come to that in a moment. Thank you for listening to my diatribe. Thank you for staying with me. You are lovely people, and we really appreciate Ed and I, our loyal and dedicated listeners. I think that's Caroline Keep, isn't it? KA2081, I think, and Tim and Lucy and Rachel. It's lovely to have you here, and lovely to all those who are listening back. I know Richard Newbold will be listening back, and Rachel Higginson will be listening back, and quite a few other people. So thank you. But it is my duty as a Teachers Talk Radio DJ for Teachers Talk Radio to play you the adverts and the news, and then a tech update. This is going to last about 7 minutes. Please come back in 7 minutes, or don't go away for another 18 or so minutes of my verbosity. Thank you very much. Back soon.
This episode of Teachers Talk Radio has been made possible with support from Witherslack Group, the UK's leading provider of SEN education and care. They're here to support you too through an ever-growing offer of free resources, including webinars, podcasts, articles, and events aimed at supporting teaching professionals like you. Visit their website at www.witherslackgroup.co.uk to find out more.
Imagine a world where you were free to focus on sparking curiosity in your students and giving them access to the awe and wonder of learning. A world where you were supported to deliver a truly personalised education to help all your learners achieve their potential. No need to imagine it, because that's exactly what the Oxford Smart Curriculum Service delivers. Seamlessly integrating curriculum, resources, assessment, next steps and professional development, every component of Oxford Smart is connected and working to provide you with a uniquely coherent and responsive service that empowers you and your students with transformational effect. The Oxford Smart Curriculum Service. When everything connects, anything is possible.
stevewoods.co.uk for educational support in IT and computer science. Coming up, I'm delivering a number of courses. Learn to Program in Python is a free 1-hour course designed to start you on your way into Python coding. Everything works in a browser, so there's nothing to install beforehand. Join me remotely to learn the basics on Wednesday the 8th of June, 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock. Visit stevewoods.co.uk to start your journey. Are you a state school teacher in England? Why not be a hero this half term and join me for 2 days and receive up to £1,360 in bursary. Terms and conditions apply. Find out more at stevewoods.co.uk.
If you're listening to this, then we know we share one thing in common: a passion for the type of outstanding education that every child deserves. That's what makes us the leading provider of specialist education and care. We need people like you to help us achieve even more. With us, you'll be given all the resources and support you need, offered a clear path to career progression, and be rewarded with some of the best salaries and benefits the industry has to offer. We are Witherslack Group. If you'd like to find out more, we'd love to hear from you. Visit www.witherslackgroup.co.uk/careers and be part of our future.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News with Gail Glenn.
According to a report in The Independent, schools have begun giving free breakfast to all students sitting exams in an effort to support the rising numbers of families struggling with the cost of living crisis. Head teachers have said that to ensure that no one falls through the cracks, they have decided for the first time to offer free breakfast to pupils taking exams. Pep Delazio, head teacher of a secondary school in Sheffield, said, "We have gone over and above this year. We call it a warm-up, and it is just literally preparing for the exam, so we know they're good to go before the papers are out and before they go into the exam hall." A government spokesperson said, "A nutritious breakfast at the start of the day can help a pupil's attainment and behaviour. Our National School Breakfast Programme, backed by up to £24 million for 2 years, is helping children in disadvantaged areas start the day with a healthy meal. We encourage all schools to use their increased core schools and recovery funding to help children and young people according to their needs, including with breakfast clubs. In Scotland, the EIS Union, which represents around 80% of Scotland's teaching professionals, is hosting its AGM this week, with the recently launched Pay Attention campaign, which calls for a 10% pay rise for teachers amid the cost of living crisis taking centre stage. A rally is expected to take place on Saturday afternoon as part of the pay increase campaign. EIS General Secretary Larry Flanagan said, "Now in its 175th year, the EIS is the largest teaching union in Scotland, the oldest national organisation of this type in the world. The EIS AGM is one of the key events in the calendar of Scottish education and always sparks considerable debate on the issues facing our education system. This year's event is the first physical AGM that the EIS has held for 3 years as a consequence of the COVID pandemic. Following 2 years of online meetings, our members will be looking forward to reacquainting themselves with colleagues in person and engaging in lively debate on the key issues facing Scottish education." This has been your latest Teachers Talk Radio News with Gail Glenn.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello! We all buy a lot of stuff online. It's easier, more convenient, but finding the best price can be difficult. This week, let's talk about comparing prices and are reduced prices really a bargain? Without boring you with the law on price dropping, basically, shops have to have had a product on sale at a higher price for a substantial time in the past 6 months to allow them to claim a price drop. If you research this, you'll see a lot of hits on the 28-day rule. 28 consecutive days being considered a substantial amount of time. If you're shopping on a site like Amazon, for instance, there's a website that'll show you the past sale prices of a product. It's called Camel. That's 3 camels with no spaces. You can even set up a free account to send you a notification when the price drops. If you're shopping elsewhere, there's lots of price comparison sites around to help you find the best price. A simple search for price comparison will give you a huge list. My advice is find one you understand and trust and start saving. Do you have a favourite price comparison website? Why not get in touch at the TT Radio 2022 Twitter feed? Follow us and tell us what you want to know about tech. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, and back in the room. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back from the adverts and the news and the tech update. Always love the tech update. Yes, very useful. Anyway, right. So I'm not going to. I've been a bit indulgent so far, so I'm not going to go into great detail. But I think the point of my journey through science. So then after graduating, I spent 6 years working for Zeneca Agrochemicals, which was the sort of division of AstraZeneca, and then it's sort of separated and anyway, and then moved to Pfizer for 10 years. And they were much the same as SmithKline Beecham. Well, sort of different. The Zeneca Agrochemicals was much more of an applied. I worked on a manufacturing site, so it was much larger scale, and it was more formulation science, more physical chemistry, sort of less analytical, not working so closely with the organic. So I wasn't really connected to the molecule. I was more connected to the final product, that the molecule was kind of, which was crystallized into crystals, small crystals, and then formulated into a product. And that the same sort of thing that I did at Pfizer, was working on inhalation technology. So converting drug substance very, very finely micronized powder into dry powder inhalers by blending with lactose and studying the particle properties. And then I got more into, and I did a bit of work on controlled release technology at Pfizer as well. We were trying to come up with a longer acting version of Viagra. So Viagra is a bit like paracetamol. You take Viagra and you pop it in your mouth, and it works within a sort of about 20 minutes. I've never tried it myself, but it sort of gets into the blood and then does the job. Whereas it doesn't have a very long duration of action, so it fades away. Whereas some of the other competitors to Viagra on the market, slightly longer acting. I think there's Eli Lilly had one called Cialis, which just lasted a bit longer, kept going a bit longer, and then I think Glaxo had one called Levitra, or have one called Levitra as well. But then, so we were trying to kind of came up with this idea of dual release Viagra. It's a very dodgy name, isn't it? Dual release Viagra. Anyway, but basically it was a kind of controlled release technology, like lots of little coated capsules and had coated particles, microparticles inside a capsule. Some had a sort of polymer coat on that sort of swelled up over a long period of time and let the drug sort of dissolve and diffuse gradually. So the idea was you were supposed to get that sort of immediate release dose, that immediate release hit in perhaps the evening before you went to sleep, and then about 6 or 7 or 8 hours later you're supposed to get another hit, but we couldn't get the pharmacokinetics. That's the kind of the balance of the medicine concentration in the blood and with all the sort of receptors and whatever, however it all works. We couldn't get that to work, so it never actually happened. Anyway, I worked on all these different sort of things, and but what I learned as a scientist working in industry is that, yeah, and I'd love to know this, is how much I really needed to know of the sort of school and undergraduate stuff. Because obviously when you become a specialist scientist, you're working in a very narrow field, and scientists and any form of expert in anything is really a more and more about less and less, don't you? So I can tell you an awful lot about the properties of amorphous and semi-crystalline powders. I can tell you an awful lot about mass spectrometry or differential scanning calorimetry or powder X-ray diffraction and sort of a lot of those characterization techniques. And you sort of know more, but again, for those of you chemists listening, all the transition metals, vanadium and chromium chemistry is pretty interesting because of all the different colors, the different oxidation states of the electrons. But really, you become interested in what you're doing, don't you? You become interested in what you know lots about, even if you at face value you may not think, oh, doesn't sound very interesting. But then the more you do it, characterizing these things and learning lots about it. But for me, I have always been, I suppose, quite a quick thinker and a quick talker. And I've always been quite good at seeking out people who know more than me. So if I needed to sort of solve a problem, there was always someone down the corridor who'd been there and done it, and you just going to have a conversation with them. Or you could kind of go and ask someone, what journal articles should I read to try and understand this more. And it was much more collaborative and discussion based, and just you sort of learn by symbiosis, just by being around people who know kind of how to solve problems and stuff. And so I'm not sure about all this base knowledge. I was working in a pretty highfalutin and bright environment. Not everyone's deeply intellectual, though. Some people know an awful lot about their thing, but know very little about anything else. And I think that I sort of get confused about the science curriculum of why we try to teach everyone a little bit of fundamental chemistry and a little bit of fundamental physics and a little bit of fundamental biology in really what is a pretty diluted and testable way. It's easily testable. It's designed to be easily and reproducibly testable at GCSE and at A level and perhaps even at degree level. And I don't know if it's that base knowledge that makes you a good scientist, and that's what I've kind of always think about, really. And so, we seem to be trying to give 100% of the population the opportunity to become a scientist or an engineer or a doctor or a vet or whatever. when it's really controversial what I'm about to say, but when clearly people's cognitive abilities, if you think of CAT test scores or verbal reasoning, non-verbal reasoning sort of scores, if you've got a relatively low score in those areas, your brain's just not going to compute the information, not going to be able to do that sort of stuff, to do that sort of job. Now, there are jobs in science for everybody, because some of them aren't deep thinking or analytical, problem solving mathsy things. There's a lot of practical jobs, there's a lot of technician roles, there's a lot of support services, and more sort of mechanical and manual sort of dexterity and manually skilled things, which you can become, you can do, and you can learn that stuff. And of course, the other thing is, if you find GCSE maths or GCSE science a real drag, when you're 25 or 30 and you kind of fall into an apprenticeship, a little bit later in life, or working somewhere, and you realize, oh, well, actually I need to understand that, then you can go back and do your GCSE maths or your base level science, or you can have a little tutorial in it. And I think we learn stuff much quicker when we know we need to learn it than when we do in our anyway. So I've veered into curriculum now, which is not what I wanted to do. So I just wanted to say a bit about the idea of my book. Really, is that since I've been teaching science, I teach younger children. So I teach in what is essentially a middle school, but it is a private school. It's an independent prep school. So in terms of the age of children, so I teach year 5, so 9-year-olds through to year 8, so 9 to 13-year-olds, and because I've been in industry for so long, I'm just, I think our science curriculum is too fundamental too soon for too many, and although I know I greatly respect some of the science teachers I know and so who listen to here, and we do need people teaching the chemists of the future and the doctors of the future, and firing them up and enthusing them. But equally, we put a lot of people on that treadmill and they fall off it. Only 6% of all GCSE students go on to study A-level chemistry, and only 0.5% of GCSE students go on to study some sort of chemistry-based degree. And yet everybody learns a bit about the periodic table, and a bit about the structure of the atom, and a little bit about covalent bonding. Yes, I know a few people do foundation science GCSE, which is really diluted, but then foundation GCSE science is really, really diluted fundamentals rather than sort of practical applications or real life scenarios. So, but what I'm thinking about this book that I'm writing, that I've started, I'm not sure the title of it, but really, there are so many textbooks on science and so many curriculum materials, right from Key Stage 2 sort of CGP books, through all the CGP books that you have all the way through secondary school, plus all the different textbooks, whether that you can get science textbooks, for whether it's for A level or for GCSE or for Key Stage 3. There's loads of those sort of textbooks around. And then if you go into a bookshop, if you go into a Waterstones or an independent bookshop or whatever your local bookshop is, there are loads and loads of sort of people who are interested in science books. So there's loads of science encyclopedias. DK, the a pretty good publisher. I think they do some great books, on science and all sorts of other things. So science encyclopedias. There's loads of books on space, really engaging books on space, or on dinosaurs and fossils and the human body, and designed for curious children who are interested in these things. Also designed for aunts and uncles and grandparents who have no idea what to get their young grandchildren or nephews and nieces, or even children for Christmas, and think, I'll buy them a science book and it'll sit on the shelf and it won't get used. So there's all that. And then for adults, there's loads of popular science books. So you can buy, and many of them are brilliant. Most of them are brilliant, fascinating. So you can buy books on science about many things. But then I've got sitting in front of me, and I have read from this before, but it's just a new paragraph. So Robin Ince I haven't read the whole book yet. Robin Ince, who does the Infinite Monkey Cage with Brian Cox, and he's a comedian originally, and he didn't like science at school. He was put off by all the Bunsen burner stuff. He was put off by all the double physics on a Friday afternoon stuff. As I was kind of put off physics at school as well. But he's talking about here Carlo Rovelli, who is founder of the loop quantum gravity theory and a writer of very beautiful books on physics, struggled with the tedium of some of his science education, but he was able to see beyond it. As he writes in his book Helgoland, what attracted me to physics was that beyond the deadly boredom of the subject taught in high school, behind all the stupidity of all those exercises with springs, levers, and rolling balls, there was a genuine curiosity to understand the nature of reality. And I think that's what I know from a lot of the scientists I worked with, that they didn't love science at school. A lot of them, they loved history or maths or English or drama, and I know that the job of school and the job of the school science curriculum is not to make the scientists of the future. There might be some foundations there, but it's the job to sort of teach some cultural awareness of science. But I think there's a gap. In science books. So you've got books about science encyclopedias for curious, enthusiastic children. You've got a whole, load of non-fiction books on popular science, of every aspect of science you could wish to read about. You've got all these textbooks and all these curriculum materials and now workbooks and so forth and booklets and things in schools. But what you don't have, I think, is the sort of non-science, a sort of science book for non-scientists or for people who aren't interested in science, because science is immensely important to all of us, or scientific literacy is immensely important to us. So my book idea is, I'm not sure it's the best title. I sort of for non-scientists, or might be. And for me, graduate degree, beyond applying it and understanding and doing science, knowing a bit about it, that is this. Who don't have a science background, who perhaps haven't studied science beyond GCSE and perhaps didn't love it or weren't great at it then. Also for Key Stage 3 teachers, but also for children in sixth forms and in as undergraduates in the arts or in humanities, who aren't really interested in science or being put off science at school. And the sort of ideas I've got to put in it, the introduction is the first part of the introduction is really the science paradox about how we spend a lot of time sexing science and making it really exciting and telling children it's wonderful and putting on exciting science shows and space is amazing. And most children at primary school, when they go to primary school, perhaps when they go to year 7 in their secondary school, find it quite exciting, and it's made a bit too exciting. And then we start thinking chemistry is all about explosions, and it really generally. And then we go, but now there's this really meaty curriculum. You've got to learn all of it, and it's sort of, it's weird. So I want to sort of talk about science of how we perhaps big it up and overexcite and try to make it a bit sexier than it really is. and then ruin it by packing the curriculum with too much content. I want to talk about the kind of culture and this whole cultural capital thing and curiosity, which is not a universal fan. I think there was a lot of it that's not quite right, but that whole sort of, a lot of children and a lot of adults are really curious and really interested in how things work and go, well, no, you can't ask that question yet because you've got to learn the fundamentals. And this is our learning objective for today. And these are our learning objectives for the term. And this is in the GCSE specification. And that little bit of curiosity you've got about that, we'll just have to park that for a while. And maybe we'll talk about it in an end of term lesson or something. And so that sort of dichotomy that you've got between this cultural capital thing versus just exploring curiosity and exploring this world and this around us. I also think that we're a bit hung up on chemistry, physics, and biology. Yes, those are the three main disciplines in science, but actually, there are, in my opinion, 4 ways of being a scientist. There's theoretical scientists, there's investigative scientists, there's analytical scientists, and there's practical scientists. And the sort of people who make great practical scientists may not be great at learning and understanding all the theory and concepts. And the sort of people who are very analytical and can interpret data and they're based in mathematics. And designing experiments, but at school we focus on the theory all the time. That not all scientists have to have deep knowledge. As long as someone in the work group has. I think you know who to go and ask. I think that's the important thing. Is knowing everything is not important, but knowing who to ask and who to trust when you need to find something out is an important part of knowledge and understanding a subject. Knowing who the real experts are versus the blaggers and so forth. So, and then I've got my 4 overrunning here, based on my 6 themes that I run through year 7 and 8. What's the next one? Discovery and ideas, earth and sustainability, industry and invention, home and the built environment, and innovation and the future. And I kind of hook the whole Key Stage 3 curriculum to those 6 themes, the different chemistry, physics, and biology topics. And it kind of works and it kind of doesn't work. But I think that within those themes, I've read a lot of popular science books. So I want to sort of summarize the key things from various books, be it Alice Roberts' books on the incredible unlikeliness of being, on evolution, or Steve Weinberg's book on To Explain the World, which is on the sort of history of physics and stuff really, to some of the shorter books which are excellent, which I think every science teacher should read, like What is Chemistry by Peter Atkins, the Oxford lecturer, who's written textbooks on physical chemistry. But What is Chemistry is just a concise little tome. Carlo Rovelli's book, 7 Brief Lessons in Physics. Recent one, Paul Nurse, his book on What is Life, which is basically explaining biology. And these are not, so it's sort of, it's written as books. They're not written as textbooks, and they're not written as really popular science books. So it's just trying to sort of, they're short compendiums of those things that I think a bit of background knowledge into these things, a little bit of background knowledge into what a human is, really, and to think a bit beyond it. So it's all the hinterland stuff, if you like, that people talk about, hinterland beyond the core curriculum, which I think would be greatly advantageous for a primary school science teacher or a early secondary school science teacher to have carrying around in their brains, that just most people don't have the time to carry this stuff around their brains because they've not experienced being a scientist for 10 or 20 years, or they've not read all the books, or their main focus is on teaching English or maths, or their main focus is on the pastoral care for the children, but it would be greatly enrich their, the education of the next generation if people had a little bit more base understanding of things beyond textbook science, but sort of at a lower level, a more accessible level than the 200, 300, 400 page multiple books there are on popular science that you can buy in a bookshop. So that's what I'm kind of working on, and that's my idea. So I haven't had anyone to bounce anyone off, anyone to tell me sort of be quiet. Some Wi-Fi issues this end still, Toby. There've been Wi-Fi's. Oh, I disappeared in and out. Oh, I can see the messages. Oh, there's been Wi-Fi's coming out. Anyway, can people hear me now? 2 new messages. Oh, no. Just as we come to the end. Yes, Lucy can hear me. Sorry, I disappeared a lot. I'm sorry. I've just been talking and I haven't obviously had anyone to kind of point that out to me. I do see these messages, but I haven't been paying attention. Right, everybody. I've gone 5 minutes over. I'm sorry about the Wi-Fi issues. I've got poor signal again now. I'm not going to play any Korg because I haven't got Ed to offset it with the ukulele. I'd like to thank you all for listening. I apologise about the Wi-Fi issues earlier on. Inconclusive, waffly, slightly incoherent as ever. But I'm glad I've shared that with you. I hope it was useful to some of you. And do let me know via the Twitter sphere if you think I'm barking up the wrong tree or I'm onto something about this idea of a book. Anyway, everyone, but what I will do, in tribute to Ed, who's in Devon, and in tribute to my Devon farming friends, and one for Miss Charlie, shout out for Miss Charlie, who I know loves a bit of the Wurzels, I'm going to end, as I saw my Devon farming friends when the beacon lighting down in Devon last week, Mr. Ed, say goodbye with a bit of the Wurzels. Where be your blackbird too? I know where he be. He be up your wurzel tree, and I be after he. Now I sees he, and he sees I. Bugger if I don't get in. With a good big stick, I'll knock me down. Blackbird, I'll have he. How's your father? All right. Bye-bye. Back to normal next week with some less diatribe from me. Take care, all. No, not that one. This one.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.